This is an off-topic video, and it'll probably get my ass kicked when I put it on YouTube, but we're going to do it anyway. This is an article, and actually I found it on a Panther blog where one of the Panthers commented that a good portion of the Panthers are men playing women's parts, and she speculated as to why. And then she came up with this article, and then I went and looked and found out CBS News also ran the article along with a whole lot of other publications. Now, because of today's political climate, I may get my ass kicked by YouTube and Facebook, but I'm going to do it anyway. So let's take a look at it, and I gave the link for you. Many people in gore, especially Panther, are men and women's bodies. There's a number of reasons for that. I'm not going to look at it. But one research paper found how to detect men are playing. At least there's some subtle clues as to whether they're men or not. It was in an article published in January of 2014 called Information Communications in Society. Lead researcher Mia Consalvo, professor of game studies and design at Concordia University in Montreal. So this isn't just some hating person or something else. It's a legitimate university study. You can't leave these things behind, Consalvo to life science. It's not like we used to think the internet was some crazy space where you can totally try different things. You bring a piece of yourself with it. Now, interesting enough, the research found that women do not tend to play men characters as much as men play women characters. Now, in gore, I think there's an exception to that. Because women can't be warriors, and some women do want to be warriors, I found that a lot of women may have alts and come in as that, especially during a raid or something like that. It's amazing how many. I was in a raid in a city, I'm not going to tell you which one, and over 50% of the warriors were women. And they were using voice to coordinate the raid in Discord, and you knew right away which ones were the girls and which ones were the boys. But that's not the point. The point is usually it turns out that more men play women than women play men. Gore may be an exception because of the fact that the role play does not allow for women to be warriors, and some women are darn good as warriors. So, all right, Consalvo and her colleagues were interested in studying online gender swapping because the practice is quite common. A previous study had found 79% of players in massive multiplayer online games reported playing as another gender at some point. About 30% do so regularly. It's a full third playing other genders. Interesting, women almost always play using female avatars. Men are more likely to swap. Again, this was a university study. Now, there are several caveats. This study was done 10 years ago. In today's political climate, there's a push for that to change in a lot of areas. So those numbers may have changed. But at the time, that's where it stood, and I suspect it's probably still true. So let's look on. And I found this study fascinating, and I can't ignore it. The researchers set up an online quiz dubbed Minutes of the Mass Marauders, invited World of Warcraft players to join. They divided 375 volunteers into groups of 3-4 and worked together to complete the quest. The quest was set up to force players to engage in a variety of behaviors, from having chat conversations to waging wars, solving word puzzles. The participants ranged from 18 to 55. 56% were men. 23% were the men swapped genders, and played with female avatars. Only 7% of the women played. Now, what's interesting is they picked on whether they wanted to or not. These were not assigned. The people picked themselves what they wanted to do. And that's why they said women are. Anyway, the results revealed that the male players acting as male avatars issued more directions to his fellow players and used fewer emotions and less emotional language than women playing as female avatars. Now, I'm not going to make any conclusions on this. All I'm saying is men use fewer emotions and less emotional language, and this may explain relationships in real life, but that's beside the point. Male players with female avatars far right in between these two groups, issuing fewer directions, using more emotional modes of communication than male avatars controlled by men, but not to the extent of female avatars controlled by women. So there were degradations, basically, interesting enough. Males that did males used fewer emotions, less. Males that played as female did more emoting using that type of communication, but not as much as women who played women. 2. In player movements, male players acting as female avatars really showed their true colors. Now this one is really just blows me away. Men moved and jumped more, stood further from other players when clustered in groups. Now that's interesting. The comfort level thing, that would show up in Second Life or in virtual games. Okay? Even when they played as females, they distanced themselves more. So no matter how much we try, we bring pieces of ourselves in. Jumping was particularly noticeable. Men playing as female avatars jumped 112 times more on average during a quest than women playing as female avatars. Now, one thing that's interesting, and this goes back to my series on Masters, which I'm going to start posting. I've only done 2 or 3 of the videos for that. But basically, women, when they watch men in Second Life, relate to men a certain way. And they sense things about them, whether they're masculine, whether they're not, whether they're a master, whether they're not, and whether we like it or not, we bring a piece of ourselves into all of this. It's subconscious. It's who we are. And even in our characters, we try and disguise it. There's still little subtle clues as to who we are. And that's how women, in many cases, decide in the long run whether they want to have somebody as their person. The players got to decide whether they swap gender. So researchers aren't sure how much of the preferred change occurred because men tried to alter behavior when they played as females, swapped avatar. Remember, the ones that did the swapping tended to add more emotions and stuff into their emotes. Not as much as a female, but more. So they don't know how much of that influenced it. And whether men who decide to swap avatars behave differently no matter what. They did find differences in these behaviors based on the player's own level of stereotypical masculine and feminine traits, however, which is interesting. And last, quote, we still believe that we can be different. We still believe a little bit that we can be different by anonymous online, Consalvo said. I think the research shows that we really bring ourselves into these online spaces. The traces of who we are, how we build ourselves up, how we act, how we talk. We're taking all of those things with us, and it's a part of our gender socialization. That statement I'm not going to touch. But anyway, the point of it is that that is why some people make natural masters, some don't. Some are in real life, and some are not. And no matter how much you try and say, well, I'm a master, whatever, you either are or you aren't, because in real life, you've already marked yourself. So anyway, I wanted to bring this up. I found that to be an interesting research. I found that this morning, and I wanted to bring it to you. Hopefully I won't get trashed by with the current political climate. Be well.
That's all, folks.